So I need the microphone. I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I first want to start off by thanking the Wellesley Free Library and the Wellesley Cultural Council for supporting our programs. I also want to thank Wellesley Media, particularly Paul Falcone, who has been just wonderful in making our programs available to a broader audience by recording them. So thank you. Although tonight's program focuses on creativity and older adults, there is no doubt that integrating art and creative endeavors throughout the lifespan has enormous benefits. And so I would like to welcome Ms. Raquel Stephenson. Dr. Stephenson is a professor of art therapy at Wellesley University and founder of Creative Aging Solutions. Her practice, research, and scholarship are at the intersection of aging and creativity, including her book, Art Therapy and Creative Aging, Reclaiming Elderhood, Health, and Well-Being. She was co-founder and teaching artist for the Creative Approaches to Healthy Aging program, funded by 2 NEA artwork grants, and founded New York University's Creative Aging Therapeutic Services. She serves on boards and advisory committees for several art organizations. Thank you so much, Raquel.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much. I'm just so delighted to be here and feel really honored to have been invited to present today. I'm really happy to see all of you here in the audience, so wonderful. Before I launch into this presentation, I thought we would just do I kind of want to just check in with you all. I'm curious to know what's kind of art engagement is your are you an artist? You make art? Do you collect art? Do you view art? And when you think about that, what is the most important part about that to your life? Maybe share with someone sitting close to you for about 2 minutes. So how do you engage with art, and how is it meaningful to you in your life?
Which is what I do, because I just jump in and I kind of access giving myself a break. And also maybe 90%
Another minute or so. Keep sharing. So I know this conversation with you all having could go on and on and on for hours. It could be a topic of a whole nother presentation. But I'm just curious if a few people might want to share how the arts are important to you. How is it meaningful to you? A few people feel like sharing.
Well, I think we've just talking about it, it sometimes is a way, something to, a place to escape to.
A place to escape to.
I think that is something that we just
Great.
talked about.
Great, thank you. Any others feel like sharing? Yes.
It helps me feel balanced inside. Like if I haven't been painting for a while, I feel the need to, and then I feel better.
So that urge, I gotta do it. It makes you feel balanced inside. Great, thank you.
It's a way to like express yourself.
Way to express yourself, absolutely.
It's constant learning. It can never be good enough. And
Constant learning.
it's looking at other people, learning from other people, so it's a really growth avenue.
Never be good enough. Ooh, there's some challenge in there, but yes, I hear you
The
constantly.
challenges.
Yeah, constantly learning. It's always something to learn. Yes.
It takes me to some places that I didn't go to before, and I'm discovering parts of my brain that I really haven't used very much or gotten to know very well.
Interesting. So you're really learning and exploring new parts of yourself. Yeah, wonderful. Great, thank you. Yes.
I take it from a very historical perspective. I love history, and I can find things that either the painter represents a period of time, even if it was recent time, i.e. our paths could have crossed. That's how I feel about Rockport. And, but it's basically the history. What was going on at the time that the artist painted, drew that plot, whatever it is.
So much can be learned about history. Yeah, I know studying art history for me is probably the only way I've learned history. It's visual. Yeah, thank you. There's so many things already, and difference of meanings and how art is so impactful in our lives. So my discussion here today is going to be more specific to how artistic expression can support healthy aging, and how the aging process itself transforms and enriches the creative life. So this topic sits at the crossroads of neuroscience, psychology, and art. And it's about more than painting or sculpture. It's about the human impulse to make meaning. Can you all hear me, by the way? This microphone? Okay, good. And as we explore creativity in later life, it enhances cognitive function, emotional well-being, and social connectedness. And at the same time, the process of aging invites continual exploration and self-expression, identity formation, and resilience. And through creative engagement, older people reinterpret life experiences and layer them onto an ever-evolving whole. So as you know, our society is growing older. The population aged 65 and older is growing faster than any other demographic. In 2022, people 65 and older represented 17% of our population, and by 2040, they're expected to comprise 22%. And the 85 and older population is projected to more than double in the same time period. Baby boomers are not quietly stepping aside. They're redefining what it means to age, and many are healthier, more educated, and more active than previous generations. And they're bringing that energy into creative pursuits. The sheer length of modern adulthood is astonishing. With increased life expectancy, someone born today could spend over 60 years in adulthood. That span holds tremendous potential for growth and reinvention. In this context, aging is not a static state, it's a creative process in and of itself. Each decade invites a new composition, a rebalancing of color and tone, and a redefinition of self. Developmental theory once treated adulthood as a plateau. You matured, you worked, you retired, and that's it. But research in developmental psychology, from Erickson to contemporary gerontologists, show that adult development is dynamic and ongoing. Cognitive, emotional, and creative growth continue throughout the lifespan. So now we speak of adult development stages with more nuance, with each unique patterns of challenge and discovery. In other words, adult development is still developing. It thrives on experimentation, reflection, and transformation, the same qualities that define a fulfilling life. So why focus on creativity? Because creative expression sustains and enriches our capacity to think, to feel, and to connect. When we engage creatively, we're not just making art, we're shaping meaning. The relationship between creativity and aging is reciprocal. Art enhances well-being, while aging deepens artistic identity. And as the years accumulate, experiences become raw material. Memory loss, resilience, and wonder find new forms. Art allows all of those elements to coexist, and sometimes harmoniously and sometimes in tension, and to be transformed into beauty and understanding. In short, creativity doesn't simply survive aging, it thrives on it. So I've always liked to make art. As a kid, I enjoyed making sand art, and then I rendering realistic drawings of apples and animals and sailboats. But creative writing was really my go-to means of expression, until a family member, though, read every single word of my very well-hidden journal. Thank you. So I stopped writing, needless to say, and my artwork really changed. Instead of putting my adolescent angst into words, I buried it in code, in colors, in symbols, in forms. My artwork became emotionally expressive, more abstracted. I put it all in there, and I learned that art is a vehicle to safely express myself, and that experiencing flow state is deeply enjoyable, and it's the easiest way for me to reach it is through art making. My love of art, my fascination with psychology, and my desire to help others converged in the fields of art therapy and creative aging. My grandmother encouraged me to work with children, but my heart was really drawn towards older adults. It's a group that's often overlooked in both psychology and art, and plus I really enjoyed being around older people. I was very close to my grandparents growing up. And early in my career, few art therapists actually specialized in gerontology. At the time, the prevailing narrative treated older people not as creative individuals in evolution, but that view is changing. Now about a quarter to a third of my students are actually working with older people. Yay! We're seeing a growing awareness that art is not just appropriate for older people, it's essential. Our culture often tells a narrow story about aging, one defined by loss, decline, and limitation. I actually did a little experiment one day. I went to the card aisle in a grocery store. I mean, you've all seen these before. And I counted like 70 to 80% of the cards were like kind of poking fun, sometimes disparagingly, at aging. It was shocking to me how ageist these cards were. You can imagine like another ism. If the cards were about that, it would be like unacceptable. We're always talking about losing this, losing that, but aging also brings gain, including growth, mastery, perspective, and freedom. So what if we saw aging not as erosion, but as refinement? A painter doesn't remove color from a canvas, they add layers to create depth. And similarly, each year of life adds texture and resonance. Aging is a masterwork in progress, not a finished piece. Contrary to stereotype, creativity often increases with age. We gain complex problem-solving, emotional insight, and cross-generational understanding. We take more creative risks, believe it or not, because we're less attached to outcomes and more tuned to process. Artists in later life often report a sense of creative liberation. They work more intuitively, less driven by perfectionism, more open to experimentation. That openness is a hallmark of both creativity and resilience, and it is deeply tied to well-being in older adulthood. Creativity evolves throughout life. Each early theories linked it to childhood play, while later perspectives emphasize complex thinking and experience. As people age, their thinking becomes more flexible and more adaptive, which can change how they express creativity. Their work often shifts from external influences to more personal and introspective themes. The focus moves from a spontaneous expression to more purposeful reflection. And older artists may become more thoughtful in their composition, aiming for balance and integration rather than dominance. Think of Rembrandt's self-portraits here, from a young artist, middle-aged to older man, from dynamic to dramatic to calm, dramatic and then calm and contemplative over here. Though research is limited, the findings suggest that key creative abilities, especially divergent thinking, do remain strong in later life. And why? It's because life experience accumulates, and the brain keeps adapting, and it keeps growing. And older adults often develop deeper emotional balance and use both hemispheres of the brain more equally, enhancing their ability to express complex ideas. And we'll talk about that more in just a moment. When we talk about creativity and aging, we're not just talking about imagination. We're talking about the brain's remarkable ability to grow and to adapt. This map of the Mississippi River's shifting path over time reminds me of that adaptability. This is thanks to neuroplasticity, the brain's lifelong capacity to form new connections. Once thought to decline after early adulthood, we now know the brain remains dynamic well into later life, and creative activity is one of the most effective ways to stimulate that growth. Engaging in art, painting, writing, dancing, singing, activates a wide range of brain regions. Visual art stimulates spatial reasoning. Music and poetry engage rhythm, language, emotion. Dance integrates movement, memory, and coordination. This whole brain activation acts like a cognitive cross-training, keeping neural pathways flexible and interconnected. For older people, this is especially powerful as some neural systems slow with age. Creativity invites the brain to reorganize and recompensate. It strengthens interhemispheric communications, a process known as Herald model, which stands for the hemispheric asymmetry reduction in older adults, where both sides of the brain collaborate more fluidly. This integration supports mental flexibility and emotional insight. Younger brains tend to specialize, analysis on the left, creativity on the right, but as we age, the brain becomes more bilateral. Both hemispheres collaborate on tasks once handled by one. This cross-communication supports more holistic thinking, richer emotional processing, and associative leaps that make creativity flourish. Far from decline, this integration shows adaptive intelligence, a brain that compensates by becoming more interconnected. It's as if over time the mind learns to see the whole picture, just as an artist steps back from the canvas to perceive balance and harmony. This bilateral engagement mirrors the blending of cognition and emotion, and it matures over the lifespan. So in early adulthood, we often analyze first and feel later. But in later life, those systems intertwine. Experience teaches us that logic without empathy is incomplete, and feeling without perspective is fleeting. And creativity thrives right there, where emotion informs thought, and thought gives structure to the emotion. That integration supports what psychologists call post-formal thought. Reasoning marked by flexibility and a tolerance for ambiguity, and the ability to hold multiple truths at once. This kind of thinking is quintessentially creative and a hallmark of mature cognition. When older adults engage in art making, they're not just recalling techniques or memories, they're synthesizing contradictions, joy and grief, gain and loss, continuity and change. into unified expression. Art becomes a living model of cognitive development. It trains the brain to adapt, to make novel associations, and to find coherence in complexity, amid complexity. Whether through jazz improvisation, collage, or new mediums, the older artist practices flexibility not just in their hands, but in their thinking. And while art encourages flexibility, it also cultivates continuity. Returning to a familiar medium rekindles long-term memory and identity. The neural networks engaged decades earlier, the smell of linseed oil, the feel of clay, for example, reactivate, reconnecting the past and present selves. And this way, art making literally binds time together, connecting memory and imagination. That temporal integration, linking the past and the present, is one of the most profound cognitive gifts of creative aging. But creativity's benefits extend far beyond cognition. Emotionally, the arts provide one of the most effective ways to regulate affects and build resilience. Studies show consistent reductions in anxiety, depression, and loneliness. Dr. Jean Cohen's longitudinal research study at George Washington University found that adults over 65 participating in weekly creative arts programs reported better morale, fewer doctor's visits, and less medication use than the control groups. They also described a greater purpose and motivation, even with physical limitations. So this suggests creativity actively nurtures psychological continuity, the ability to maintain a coherent sense of self, even as the body and circumstances change. Creativity sustains what we now call cognitive reserve, the brain's ability to adapt even in the face of aging or pathology. But in human terms, it sustains something deeper. It's meaningful participation in life. To create is to stay alive to one's own becoming. Those who engage in creative practice in later life not only function better cognitively and emotionally, but often describe themselves as more whole. While creativity strengthens cognition and emotion, its power also lies in how it invites us to take risks. It's been that long since my son was learning how to drive, so I kind of resonate with that. To step what is beyond familiar and into the unknown, risk-taking isn't just a feature of arts. It's vital to personal growth as well, especially later in life. Whether trying a new medium, sharing vulnerable artwork, or beginning again after a setback, creative engagement asks us to be brave. This courage to explore, to fail, to begin, mirrors the broader journey of aging. Just as art making challenges us to stretch and embrace uncertainty, so too does life. Risk fuels discovery, it builds confidence, and reminds us of our capacity to adapt and evolve. So to illustrate this, I'd like to share a personal story, and it's one that began not in an art studio, but on a river. So a few years ago, I wanted to learn how to whitewater kayak. For whatever reason, it's something that I had always wanted to do, and I finally decided to do it at age 49. So I decided to start this new adventure, and I was taking lessons and obsessively looking at YouTube videos to figure out how to do this. So crashing through rapids down a rocky river in a small plastic boat, it can be risky. It's kind of a crazy thing to do. And it's not the safest thing in the world. And like other activities, it can be quite risky. My friends and family thought that I was doing this. I wasn't. But hucking oneself off of a waterfall is really only done by the pros and people trying to get on the cover of a magazine or maybe trying to get a lot of likes on Instagram. But in reality, whitewater kayaking at first looks like this. Simple skills needed to be learned and mastered, like basic paddle strokes and how to maneuver through slow-moving water from one eddy to another, and hopefully without capsizing. And then after many failures and triumphs, it might look like this. So having left fear at the top of this scary rapid, I trusted my emerging skills enough to go for it. I capsized shortly after this photo was taken, and I did not roll up, which meant I had to swim, and it was a disaster, but I survived. Oh well, another skill that I had to learn and practice. Still haven't mastered it. Anyway, I realized that whitewater kayaking is a lot like life. It's unpredictable, it's challenging, and it's full of moments to test my balance and my courage. I can't control every rapid, but I can control choose how I respond in pushing myself to grow in the process. So risk-taking in kayaking also parallels risk-taking in art. Both require stepping into the unknown, trusting our instincts, and learning from mistakes. In both, progress and discovery come not from avoiding uncertainty, but from moving with it and embracing the flow. Risk-taking, art-making, and aging are all interrelated processes that foster continued personal and cognitive development throughout the lifespan. As people age, while there can be a tendency to seek stability and avoid uncertainty, we often become bolder. Engaging in creative practices that involve risk can counteract this pattern by stimulating curiosity, adaptability, and self-expression. Artistic risk-taking, whether through experimenting with new materials, exploring unfamiliar techniques, or presenting one's work to another, encourages flexibility of thought and emotional resilience. In this way, the integration of risk and creativity supports lifelong growth, sustaining openness to experience and maintaining a dynamic engagement with the evolving complexities of life. So I'm curious, who in the audience is an artist? Raise your hand. And who in the audience makes art? So many people think that this is what being an artist looks like. Having a painting in the gallery and everyone's standing there looking at it. Maybe it's famous. But usually it looks more like this. Being an artist is really for anyone. And my definition of an artist is a person who uses visual or other means to communicate to the world, to themselves, or to express feelings, thoughts, ideas, and maybe that they're not even known yet. Like words, art is a tool for communication. And making art is also taking a risk. Art is external. Others will see it and they'll have a response, their own response or their own understanding to your work. But as an artist, you are giving something of yourself to the viewer. You're putting something of yourself out there to be viewed and possibly judged, and it can be scary. At least for me, it's scary to hang up my work. Your artwork is provoking a response and an acknowledgement. Don't worry, your work does not need to be in the Louvre for you to consider yourself an artist. Being an artist is how you see the world and how you express it. It isn't simply gaining technical skills, though that's useful. An artist harnesses the complexity of visual expression. Visual art is less clear than words, and that's the beauty of it. Art makes you feel and think and wonder. The viewer is creating something from your creation. How generous of you, artist. As you move through your life, what do you see? What do you see beyond the subject? An artist does the same with their creative expression. The how of making art matters. How did you feel making it? Did you experience roadblocks? How did you keep moving? We can learn a lot from our artwork. It has a lot to teach us if we're open to learning. So this might sound silly, but what would it say to you? What questions would you ask of your art? And how might they answer? You can learn a lot of discovery this way. It's one example of how art can be used to deepen self-understanding. So a while back, I was fortunate to explore the inspiring journeys of three remarkable women. I call them Rose, Adina, and Marcia, who embraced art later in life and discovered profound meaning, resilience, and joy through their creative pursuits. Their stories challenge the notion that creativity fades with age. Instead, they reveal how artistic expression can flourish, deepen, and transform as we grow older. Through their voices, we see how art can be a source of empowerment, motivation, and connection. Rose, a thoughtful and quietly confident woman, discovered her identity as an artist later in life. But once she claimed it, it became central to how she understood herself and her place in the world. She began painting at age 40 after years of feeling invisible and undervalued. Raised in a family of seamstresses and clothing designers, her early creative outlets were sewing and fashion sketching, but she never considered herself an artist until a friend introduced her to painting. That moment was transformative for her. Art gave Rose more than a skill, it gave her a voice. She began taking classes, not just to learn technique, but to explore who she was. She said, "Art has been very much an enabler for me. I feel very secure in the fact that I'm an artist." Rose was deliberate in how she defined herself. She resisted being labeled by her age, refusing to disclose it publicly, not out of vanity, but to protect her work from being diminished by ageist assumptions. She said, "I don't want anyone looking at something and saying, 'That's beautiful, pretty good considering her age.' My age has nothing to do with it." Her identity as an artist was not about external validation, though she did exhibit her work in galleries and felt proud of the recognition. Her work was really about self-worth and agency. Before discovering art, she felt that her opinions didn't matter. Through painting, though, she began to value her own voice. Rose preferred working alone, valuing independence and authenticity. She was selective about feedback, accepting critiques only from artists that she respected, and she didn't seek to emulate others, nor did she feel pressured to produce a masterpiece. She told me, "I don't feel that before I die, I must turn out the great American masterpiece. I want to make art that satisfies me." Her work was deeply personal. One of her earliest pieces, Bedouin Man, held a special meaning for her, not just for the aesthetic qualities, but for the emotional connection it created with her late husband. He saw something in the drawing that moved him deeply, and that moment affirmed Rose's artistic voice. Later in life, Rose experienced a creative block that lasted for several years, and she described it as a bitter frustration, unable to complete a single picture. Yet even during this time, she remained connected to art through teaching, art history, and creative writing. And eventually, she broke through with this painting, or this drawing, Nighttime Beach Scene, a pastel drawing that reawakened her sense of possibility. And then a few years later, after surgery, it left her dominant arm immobilized, Rose began painting with her left hand. And this shift led her into abstraction and storytelling, culminating in works like this one, Racing Colors, which is a playful pastel drawing that imagined primary colors fleeing from the blacks. So the primary colors are running in one direction and the blacks coming in another. She found this new phase liberating, remarking that being able to make art again was enormously empowering, and it showed me that I could overcome obstacles and achieve my goals. Rose's identity as an artist was deeply intertwined with her experience of aging. Art gave her a sense of purpose, a way to navigate physical limitations and emotional challenges. Rose reflected, "Painting has grounded the aging, and the aging at the same time is grounding. I approach my aging without resentment. I feel as though I have delivered some kind of message. Something has made my years worth it." For Rose, being an artist was not just about making images. It was about claiming her place in the world. It gave her confidence, community, and a sense of continuity. She described art as a bridge across generations, a way to connect with others regardless of age. Adina, a dynamic and expressive 79-year-old, came to art later in life also, but with a sense of urgency and purpose that made her work deeply resonant. Born in England and shaped by the trauma of World War II, she was evacuated from London as a child and spent years in a medical facility recovering from tuberculosis. These early experiences of dislocation, illness, and loss profoundly influenced her worldview, and it later became central themes in her artwork. For decades, Adina worked as a social worker with psychiatric patients, And though she had always been creative, sewing with scraps during wartime shortages and crafting beautiful garments, she didn't begin making what she considered real art until her retirement. With retirement came freedom. Adina embraced collage and assemblage, collecting discarded materials, paper, photographs, textiles, and transforming them into layered, textured works that honored memory and gave voice to the forgotten. Her art was not only a creative outlet, but a way to assert her identity as an artist. A title she had long hesitated to claim. She reflected, "You're alone when you're an artist because you're thinking differently about everything you see. I'm trying to express the truth of who I am, of what concerns me." Adina's work often paid homage to ordinary people, especially those whose lives have been disrupted by war or erased by history. In one series, she used the coffee bag bottoms that were stamped by the names of the people who were doing quality assurance and embedding scrolls with stories into the artwork, hidden messages that only she knew were there. She said to me, "Nobody will ever read it, but I know it's there." This quiet act of preservation was central to her sense of legacy. Adina saw her art as a way to rescue what others had discarded and to ensure that the lives of ordinary people were not lost to time. Her fascination with folded forms, scrolls, books, layered textures reflected her desire to conceal and reveal, to invite viewers into deeper engagement with history and emotion. As she aged, Adina's reflection on legacy became more urgent. After moving to a new apartment, she felt renewed awareness of her mortality and the passage of time, and she said, "I think a lot more about my own death and about what I want to do before I die. I feel some urgency about it." She imagined her children one day discovering her work and seeing a side of her that they didn't know. Adina's art explores identity and legacy through layered, emotionally resonant materials. In works like this one, Lysistrata, she conceals meaning to invite deeper engagement, believing that the true understanding requires effort. Her use of color and texture evokes memory and emotion, transforming overlooked fragments into lasting expressions of the self. Claiming the identity of an artist was a transformative act for Adina. It allowed her to reframe her life story, not just one marked by trauma and survival, but one of creation, meaning, and contribution. Her art became a legacy, a way to speak across time and generations. And through her artwork, Adina reminded us that being an artist is not about recognition or perfection. It's about truth, voice, and the courage to say, "I was here. This is what mattered to me." And then Marcia, at 90 years old, was a quietly powerful presence. She was soft-spoken, deliberate, and deeply reflective. Her apartment was filled with stacks of paintings, and her bedroom was transformed into an art studio, revealing the depth of her commitment to her art making. And though she walked and spoke slowly, her mind was agile and her creative energy was palpable. Marcia was raised on a farm in Vermont during the Great Depression, and her early life was shaped by practicality and resourcefulness. Her father was a Romanian woodworker and instilled in her a love for craftsmanship. But it wasn't until adulthood that she also began to explore painting seriously. She took her first art class in her 30s and later attended night classes at the Brooklyn Museum Art School. But still, she considered herself largely self-taught. For many years, Marcia hesitated to call herself an artist. She recalled attending a symposium where few women felt comfortable claiming the title, though many men claimed the title. But over time, her perspective shifted. She reflected, 30 years ago, I certainly couldn't say I'm an artist, but now I'm glad I have this identity. Maybe it's an ego boost, but as I age, I'm more ready to say that I'm an artist. This evolution and self-identification was deeply tied to her motivation to create. Art became a way to explore her inner world, to ask metaphysical questions, and to stay connected to life. She described her process as intuitive and unstructured. She said, "I just fly without a compass. I'm on a discovery mission, trying to fish for things." Marcia's paintings were born from a place of curiosity and experimentation. She didn't begin with a plan or a sketch. Instead, she made marks and shapes, allowing images to emerge organically. Her work often involved layering and masking, revealing ghostly traces of earlier identities beneath the surface. This method mirrored her belief that meaning is discovered, it's not imposed. Her motivation to paint persisted even during difficult times. Marcia suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome, which made physical movement exhausting. She described it as walking in mud, yet continued to paint even when each piece felt like, quote, "wretched for me at great expense." Despite these challenges, she remained prolific, driven by a need to create and to explore. Marcia's work evolved over time. She spoke of her gray period, influenced by mystical experiences and spiritual inquiry. These paintings, often misunderstood as expressions of depression, were instead reflections of her inner journey. Later, her style shifted again. Her canvases grew larger, her colors more vibrant, her shapes more angular and symbolic. She said to me, "I think I'm about to go through a change. I'm interested in both holistic and fragmented processes. I think this has something to do with my spiritual beliefs and how they've changed throughout my life." Art gave Marcia a sense of purpose and vitality. It was a way to stay mentally engaged, to connect with others, and to continue growing. She believed that being an artist made aging easier. She said, "Art gives me a goal. I have something to do, I have something to reach for, which gives me more of a feeling of aliveness." Her identity as an artist was not just a label, it was a way of being. It allowed her to remain curious, open, and expressive. Through painting, Marcia found a bridge to other people, to new ideas, and to the deeper truths of her own life. Rose, Adina, and Marcia each followed unique paths to art, yet their stories converge in a powerful truth. Creativity does not diminish with age, it deepens, it evolves, it becomes more meaningful. Their experiences remind us that aging is not a closing chapter, but a rich and fertile time for discovery. Through art, they found ways to express emotions that had long been buried, and to connect with different generations, and to reclaim parts of themselves that had been silenced and overlooked. Rose found her voice and confidence through painting, transforming personal pain into beauty and connection. And Adina used collage to honor memory and history, giving voice to the forgotten and the invisible. And Marcia painted her way through spiritual inquiry and physical limitation, discovering joy and purpose in the act of creation. Each woman faced challenges, illness, loss, societal expectations, but art gave them a way to transcend those limitations. It became a tool for healing, a source for empowerment, and a bridge to others. Their stories show us that creativity is not bound by age, by skill level, or circumstance. It's a human impulse, a way of making meaning, and a path to wholeness. They challenge the myth that older people are less capable, less relevant, or less creative. Instead, they show us that with age comes depth, perspective, and a unique ability to see the world and ourselves with clarity and compassion. The stories of Rose, Adina, and Marcia reflect a powerful truth. Creative aging is not an isolated phenomenon. It's a growing global movement redefining what it means to grow older. In 2019, the World Health Organization reviewed over 900 studies and concluded that arts participation, from painting and music to dance and storytelling, significantly improves health and well-being across the lifespan. For older adults, creative engagement boosts cognition, emotional resilience, and social connection. And neuroscience confirms what artists have long known, that creativity strengthens neural pathways, it fosters adaptability, and supports identity. When older adults create, they're not just making art, they're renewing themselves. Creative aging is more than a trend. It's a paradigm shift, one that sees aging not as a decline, but as a time of growth, meaning, and expression. Across cultures, the arts are helping older adults reclaim their voices, build legacy, and stay vibrantly connected to life. So what can we take from this? The creative expression in later life enhances cognitive function, emotional well-being, and social connectedness. It allows older adults to reinterpret experience, strengthen identity, and maintain resilience. And ultimately, it reminds us that the arc of creativity stretches across the lifespan, with age refining expression into a form of wisdom that only time can cultivate. As Leonardo reminded us, art is never finished, only abandoned, and may we never abandon our creative selves, no matter what. So thank you for sharing this time with me, and my hope is that you leave tonight inspired to view your own life as a living artwork, and that you keep creating and making connections. Thank you. And I think we have some time for questions. People have questions. Yes?
I don't have a question. I thought it would be interesting for you to know that the wonderful paintings around here were done by a gentleman for whom oil painting or painting was a second career. And is well into his 90s and is still painting every day.
These are wonderful paintings. And I was walking around thinking, my gosh, and there's a lot of them. Very prolific artist.
Well into his 90s.
Wow. Beautiful work. Thank you.
So, I know a lot of people that don't do art or dancing or singing or these creative things, writing. How would you encourage them? In fact, I think there's many people, especially in our generation or our parents, that actually worked very, very hard, right? So leisure time or the word hobbies wasn't something that was readily talked about or explored in their life.
Yes.
So how would one go about presenting the idea? I mean, all the science is here
Yes.
for sure.
That's a great question, and it's something actually that I've come across a lot in my career. And I think a lot of it has to do with just that feeling of like, what does it mean to be an artist? I have to have skill, I have to have talent, and sort of this pressure that if I don't have the skill or the talent, I can't do it. I was just telling someone earlier, when I was talking to Rose, she said something like, "Are you a singer?" And I said, "I can't sing. I have a terrible voice." And she said, "Well, do you sing in the shower or do you sing in the car?" I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "Well, you're a singer." I'm like, "Well, right." So I have the same feeling about an artist, is that you don't have to be like a trained artist or have talent, but if you like to doodle or play around with colors, you're an artist. So I like to try to like kind of take away that expectation that, I don't know, something we learned, I think, maybe in third grade, and if you couldn't draw the elephant the right way, then, it's bad, and people just stopped making art, just to have fun with it. It's a tool of communication, to play. I encourage people to play around with colors. I often tell people, like, yeah, let's just take our non-dominant hand, pick a color, and let's make a doodle and see what we see in it, and kind of turn it into a drawing or a sculpture. So I really try to kind of take away that pressure and the expectation and bring it back to play. So that would have been my first thing.
If you think about it, seniors in art is sort of interesting. It's almost like a second childhood. You think of your children, your grandchildren, when they were toddlers. What's the first thing that they start doing is drawing and painting and all sorts of creative things on tables that are this high. And seniors are almost reinventing what they learned when they were 2 or 3 years old. That freedom, that joie de vivre, it's a wonderful thing.
The difference being that the children don't have the societal expectation or being told it's wrong or any of those kinds of judgment calls that our lifetime, how much of that has been imposed upon us, and so we're, need to be validated, are we good enough, all those kinds of things. So I think an important part of engaging in the arts, even as young adults or whenever, is to really try to let that go behind and go back to the playfulness of it, go back to the exploration part. The reason why kids do it is because it's fun, it's enjoyable. It's not a task, it's something that's fun. So to try to kind of reconnect with that, I think is really important. That may be another part of answer to your question.
Bouncing off of what you're saying, in a conversation that I was having with my neighbor here, when we're little, art class is what you do when you finish your spelling. You get socialized into the idea that it's really not very important. So you fill your lives with the stuff that's labeled important, and then you realize that this very essential part of yourself wasn't treated seriously.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other conversation of just the priorities and shifts in our society and education, and it's a big part of who we are as humans is the arts or expression in some kind of way. I spent a lot of my career working as an art therapist with people with advanced dementia, and when I work with them, they're not telling me what's going on. We don't communicate verbally. We communicate only by what's the movements they're making, the small movements, how they're moving the brush across the paper, or how they're making subtle shifts that I have to pay close attention to understand what that communication is. But I guess what I mean by that is that it kind of goes back to just the purity of expression, that the words sometimes can kind of mask or hide, or put pressure on expression that otherwise maybe doesn't need to be there. So I really love working with dementia, people with dementia, because it kind of goes back to that purity in a way. But I'm not sure where I was going with that point, but it was related to something someone said. Yeah.
I was just wondering if, like, in pre-industrial society, art was more integrated into daily life, and that things have shifted so dramatically. Now, you're not going to teach art primarily in school because you have to make a living. Whereas, pre-industrially, people had to make their own pottery and do their own baskets and make their candle and create tools and create clothing and so forth. And I think and tell stories. I think whether it was either writing it or telling it verbally, I think it was just much more integrated into a different society.
Just part of living. It wasn't something that had to be taught or trained, which is it's really interesting, that point, because the World Health Organization, I mentioned that they had this study, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, look at that. The arts can really be a great way to improve health and well-being. Well, we, art therapists, creative arts therapists, have known this for 70 years, like, hello. So it's kind of like this new discovery, and the reality is, like, since the beginning of time, humans have used expression. They've used the arts in some capacity to communicate, to express themselves, so it's always been there. But after a while, like, things kind of get bracketed out, and then we rediscover it. And now we need to have, like, scientific data and research studies to show how beneficial it is. Would really, I know in my gut, you probably all know in your gut, like, it's good stuff. Like, do you really need to see charts and get graphs to, like, find that it's worthwhile in your life? But that's where we are.
And as I'm sitting here, I'm realizing that I'm going back in my own past, and to little drawings that I probably showed family members. And at one point, I thought I was going to be an artist, and then I thought I was going to be a nun. But anyways.
Sister Wendy.
What I think about is the eye and hand coordination. So it's something that's also very connected to the creation of art. And to me, my garden is my canvas. And it's my gift to my neighborhood. And I used to garden in the back of the house, and I realized it was rather isolating, so I transplanted things out to the front. And every year I try to do something whimsical or different with the colors, the textures of my plants and things like that. And it's so interesting because to me, that's my eye-hand coordination. The planting of the bulbs, the planting of the bushes, the arrangements of these perennials. But the nice thing about it is that every year, my neighbors pick up what's different.
You're paying attention.
They do, because I'm in a walking neighborhood. A lot of people walk because I'm by the ocean. And one time I think I was fishing for a compliment from a friend, and I said something like, well, I'm not very talented, I'm not artistic. And he said to me, Ellen, your garden is your palette, you know? And I thought, good, I've just been, had some affirmation. So there are so many ways that you can eye-hand coordinate.
Yeah.
But I'm being inspired right now. I don't think I've picked up a brush in decades.
But going back to the gardening, though, I think that you're absolutely right. Like, there's the hand-eye coordination, but there's so much more. I think the physicality of gardening, like, that's a whole nother dimension where you're using your body and you're using, your knowledge of how to plant, and you're looking like aesthetically, colors, and when are things blooming. Like, there's a lot of dimensions to that, which is exciting.
Well, it's the only place you can really get dirty.
Yeah. Other ways to get dirty, but that's a socially acceptable way. Yes.
I think a lot of people also, they confuse being a good draftsperson with being artistic. That's what they learned early on. You have to be able to, how to draw.
It helps.
And, but it's a very, very good. I have a girlfriend, I think in her 40s or 50s. Her mother was an exhibiting artist who did mainly abstract, but she, had been doing oil. And she always said she never could draw, she never could do, and she started taking up pottery, and she did these wonderful vessels, sort of, free form and so forth. And, she had this, and her house is also very artistic. She has it. So I think that there's a confusion there. But the other thing I was going to say is that I think a lot of people, as part of like the self-care revolution and so forth, they're doing these, the coloring books for adults or the paint by numbers for adults. And, often they're having fun doing it, or they're finding it, relaxing, or, again, a different creative process. And they don't have to feel like they, again, are good draftsmen.
Yeah, it's relaxing. It can be like kind of a meditative thing. Yeah. Yes.
I was just going to say that to your gardening, if from a very young age, children and ultimately adults could understand how important the visual world is, and that it's everywhere, and it's in everything, so that when you are doing math, or you're doing science, or you're doing history, there is art there, and it began with art. So really, ultimately, art is the most important when you're looking at all those subjects. So it's only logical that you want to strive for it.
Yeah. Which kind of makes me think about part of this arts and health movement that's happening is not just encouraging people to make art, to view art, it's also transforming like hospital environments, that if you bring in, paintings or drawings or sculptures have an aesthetically pleasing environment, that it actually helps people to heal. There's research on that, which to me seems like, well, right, of course, like if you have like plain old walls that are, that's not very exciting. So, again, kind of going back to this aha revelation about aesthetically pleasing environments and how powerful that is. So yeah, going back to your point, it's there from the very beginning.
One more question. As somebody who started painting, didn't start painting until he became 70, I'm now a firm believer that it's never too late. So how do you deal with your clients and friends to get them started? Because especially in seniors, and a lot of people have plenty of inertia from a lot of different things. How do you encourage people to give it a try?
Yeah, well, I have answered that question about 1,000 ways. Depending on who it is I'm working with, I have done so many different things. I think one is to get past the judgment part, put the judgment aside about anyone can be an artist. It's not about being an artist, it's about expression. And one of the ways that I often will encourage people to start is using their non-dominant hand. Or to start with like just shapes and colors, like what's your favorite color? Or pick 2 colors you're interested in and just start there. So it's really like directly into the material, directly into the color, using it to playfulness, experimentation, which any of us can experiment. And hopefully we have less judgment about the experimentation and playfulness. And once people can kind of get into that, then you can maybe start to like, well, this is how we might use this tool, or kind of develop their interest a little bit more. But that's one of my first things to do, is just to try to get into the play and the fun. And everyone, it's a success. It's success. No matter what you do, it's a success. You take one of the things I often will do with groups of people that I don't know who they are is I'll just have a bunch of collage materials. I often like to use like kind of a high quality tissue colored paper that when you mix it, this is very basic, but if you mix it with glue and water, you can layer these tissues on top of each other and it creates beautiful, beautiful, just different colors and textures. So someone who has a lot of skill maybe makes a very sophisticated collage, and someone who maybe hasn't done it before, it's the basic. But no matter what, there's something to look at, there's something successful and something to build on. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
Why do you encourage them to use their non-dominant?
Because, so if you are using your dominant, there's such expectation that it's the skilled one. This is I write with my right hand, I have good handwriting. When you use your non-dominant, you don't have the same expectation that your left hand or whatever non-dominant is going to be able to function in such a way. So you don't have as much, if I'm writing with my left hand, which is my non-dominant, I don't expect that I'm going to be able to write anything legibly. It's okay, I can't do it. If I write with my right hand and I don't write legibly like I should. So the same thing kind of happens if you make art with your non-dominant. The expectation for how it's supposed to look or how you're able to function with that dominant, the judgment kind of goes away. Look like you're about to say something or ask a question.
Well, I was just having a different perspective. The gentleman who painted these wonderful paintings was born in 1927. And so using quick math, that makes him 98 years old. And what's intriguing to me is not about the self-actualization, but the gift that he's sharing with all of us. So I would think that and in particular, I'm in an exercise class with a man who was born in 1930 and escaped from Hungary on his 3rd try in 1956. And he's written a memories of some 400 pages that are perhaps therapeutic, but are a huge gift to those of us who appreciate the experiences and the perspective and the wisdom. So I think in some respects, it's not just to encourage people to develop their own capability and artistic sense, but it's an opportunity to share
legacy,
that accumulated wisdom. And breaking out of Hungary on your 3rd try and having got caught twice is just one little tiny segment of the lessons that I've taken from this 95-year-old guy. So I think that the opportunity isn't just for the artists, but it's for the rest of us. And I think you can convey that it's what they're doing is a gift to be shared and appreciated. I think we should encourage people.
Absolutely.
Not that they need to get started, but everybody wants them to do it. And this is not just for them. This isn't just for you. This is for everybody else. So I think that perspective is another way of encouraging people.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So I think we're at time, a little past time. You're welcome. Thank you all so much. Thank you. I do have my book, not to self-promotion, but there's more information about what I talked about in here if you're interested, and anyway.